time for you to come in.
Let me get my
for you while you're getting set up there.
Sure.
A question I have is, how often do you trade? I don't know how much, if you're going to get into that, but as you're going through, setting up your routine and all, do you tend to trade and hold for a while? Do you tend to get in and out and, pretty quickly?
I
Often?
don't have as much time as I used to, and I have started moving towards more large-based ETF sort of industry type things because I don't have as much time. But my typical thing would be to hold for weeks to months, to get a good momentum and just ride it for a fair amount of time. I just don't have the time to be sort of paying attention to daily moves and trying to get in and out on a swing trade that may last 3 days or 6 days or something. I've just got so much going on. I can't pay enough attention to it to really do that effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought that would just be a good little segue into what you're going to talk about, so everyone kind of has an idea.
I mean, time frame is a huge part of what how you decide to trade. So that's a good question.
Great.
All right. As I say, I'm just going to kind of go through how I trade, how I start to try and find things, track them, how I monitor them, how I record my results, which I will hopefully go back and look at later and try and improve. And so I'm going to go through all the sort of some tips and tricks and how I use the tools. Of course, we've gone over the tools themselves, but you can get a lot of interesting information about how people use the tools differently than you do. So I'm hoping that everybody will get something out of this that maybe they hadn't thought about before or may try themselves. Also wanted to mention that today's poll is about some of these tools that you can use to monitor and keep track of your trades. So if you've got a minute or two while we're doing this presentation, if you want to take our poll, we'll take a little bit of time at the end and kind of go over what everybody else has for their favorite tools. All right. My first thing is, of course, the dashboard. As many longtime members know, we took a fair amount of time about a year or so ago revamping the site and updating the visuals. And one of the things we really wanted to do is make the members page an actual dashboard, a cockpit where you can get a lot of information very quickly and be able to get to a lot of the features on the site very quickly. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I've got some more ideas, of course, but this is worlds better and much more useful, in my opinion. So one of the first things I use is this area here we kind of call the market movers. We've got the top 3 items are more geared towards individual stocks, the various top 10s and what other people are looking at, other users, but they're basically at the symbol level. The bottom 2 are more higher level. They're sort of looking at the market as a whole and various time frames in the case of the DP signals. My favorite is, as you can tell, the predefined alerts. The predefined alerts will give me a pretty good idea what's going on in the market. There's a lot of breadth we look at there. I can see instantly things like NASDAQ hitting an all-time high, Russell hitting an all-time high. Tom talked about that at the very opening of the show, that those areas are very strong right now. We've also got items like gold. We've got sectors doing interesting things, industries. We've got the TSX and the dollar. We've got oil. And so this is a great way for me to keep a high-level view on the market, just to kind of get a feel. If I'm looking at this every day, I kind of know what's going on. I got a general idea that I know tech's doing strong now. I know small caps are doing strong. So maybe that influences kind of where I go. So I use the predefined alerts to kind of give me an idea of what the market's doing. The next feature is one we put in sort of after we had done the initial design of the work, this dashboard here, and I love this feature. I've wanted to put this in forever. And we call it the chart panels. And this is basically just mini summaries, summary views. And as you can see, these are what I think are the most important things. I wanted to be able to go to what I consider the most important thing, and that's stuff I own. It's nice to know what the Russell's doing, and it's nice to know what all of these sectors and industries are doing. But ultimately, I care about what I've got money in. So I want to know what I own and what it's been doing. So I've got my section here for stuff I own. I'll say that this is a demo account, so this isn't actually anything I really own. It's just some examples. As I mentioned on my last talk, I put the Vanguard VTI in a lot of my chart lists, so I can kind of see how everything is doing relative to the market. Vanguard Total Market is an ETF that carries essentially the entire market. You can use any index you like, if you like the S&P or the TSX or whatever. And I put it in bold so I can kind of see where everybody's behaving. I usually sort from the percentage change, so I want to kind of pat myself on the back and see how all the good things are doing. What I should be doing most of the time is going the other direction and just kind of being on the defensive and just making sure I'm aware of the things that maybe are not doing okay. This is, of course, daily, so this fluctuates, so it's nothing to really get necessarily worried about on any given day unless you see something cratering. Like if you maybe owned Oracle, it would be interesting to know. Um, so I use that. I have the stuff I own pretty much all the time, and often it can be a number of pages. We'll show 10 items on a page here. Then we can have 2 or 3, 4 pages. So that can be, I can scroll through and kind of get a big look at everything I've got. The next item I have is a watch list, and that's I use it more than just things I'm interested in buying. Most of the time, people sort of equate a watch list with just things I'm tracking, and certainly those would be here. I also just use it for things I own that may be sort of misbehaving. It's sort of like maybe a penalty box or an area I can put things in so that I'm keeping a really close eye on things. And that may be something that's had a big dip. Maybe I'm not ready to sell it, but I really want to start keeping it under a confined space so I can look at it frequently. Maybe I've got something that's coming up on an earnings report this week and I want to keep an eye on that. I'll toss it into the watch list here. And like I said, we have 10 rows, and so we can put as many things as we want into these lists. Of course, we can put up to 500. I would find that horribly ineffective to try and look at 500 items on this view. So I try and keep my watch list just to 10. So it's one page. I can look at it and see everything that I really want to concentrate on every time I come to this page. And if I have something in that I own that I want to put into my watch list, I don't necessarily move it out of this folder because I may have annotations and other sorts of information I want to move into this watch list. And I don't want to accidentally delete it. So what I can do is I can just go view as, and I can edit. And I can just quickly go down and I can say, okay, well, maybe Apple was doing something. They've got earnings sometime soon and I want to watch them. So I'm just going to add Apple to this. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And we'll scroll down. So now Apple is in my list. Something interesting going on there. So I'll be able to quickly add items to this. Another use that I'll put sometimes in this list, if I have more money that I'm looking to put in, like I said, I had recently spent time doing sectors. So I would put things like the KRE for the regional banks or the semiconductors or retail or home builders or whatever. And I'll have maybe a list of 10 or 15 items that I would sort of, when I have some extra money and I want to sort of go back to the well and look at investing some more, I'll bounce into that list and I'll kind of look and see, keep an eye on those and just see how they're doing. So I'll have, when I'm ready to put some money in, I'll have a feel for what's been doing well. And then finally, I'll look at the scans and alerts. I don't have any alerts now, but we will be adding those very quickly. Scans is sort of one of the things I do here at StockCharts. So obviously as an investor, I use a lot of scans, and it's nice here that I can run a scan directly from the workbench or the dashboard here. I don't have to go all the way over and to the scan area, so I can just run a scan. This is just a sample scan I put together. It's similar to what I use, and if you want to, you can use the video controls to scroll back and pause this and take a look at it. But essentially, I'm looking for U.S. stocks that trade a fair amount every day. They're above $10, so they would have more institutional support. I'm not looking for ETFs in the case. This is the case where maybe I am looking for individuals. I try to avoid biotech because that just seems like a Russian roulette a lot of the time on the individuals. And I'm basically looking for 52-week highs with a lot of volume. So I'm looking for breakouts that a lot of people are buying into. And this time I got 35. I loosened this up a little bit, so I want to make sure I get some results for today's demo. Often I'll just quickly sort by the scooters, and I'll just sort of, this is a momentum scan, so it's not surprising, but look at all the 90s and 80s. So out of my 30 some odd results, probably 80% of them are showing me I'm getting stocks that are already outperforming 80 to 90% of their peers, and they're continuing to break out on strong volume. So these are sort of, I'm trying to find sort of the best of the best in terms of momentum. We do have some that are sort of in the mid-range of the scooters and are starting to pop out, and some people want to kind of play that. I tend to try and find strength that builds. So this confirms that when my basket that I've just found is sort of the area that I'm looking for. I'll also look at the universe. And again, we've talked about small caps, the Russell doing well. Tom talked about this being a show, but look how many small caps there are on my scan here. More than double the total contents of the mid and the large. So again, that little thing I've in the back of my head that's from looking at the predefined saying that small caps are strong, Russell's strong, it's backed up here. I can easily go and do the same with the sectors. We were talking earlier about the XLK doing well. We've got technology and cyclicals, so we've got a strong presence of both of those here. So that's, again, more information that those areas are where the action is at. So I'll sort by symbol, and I'll store my results. I'm just going to do that. So now I've got everybody into a chart list. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at Kendall Glance. Now this scan typically finds a lot of momentum. So a lot of these charts have the same pattern, what I kind of want to see up and to the right. Your scan may show all sorts of different variations where the scan is technically true, but you've got some history or something that you may see in a Kendall Glance that makes you maybe not interested in it. It's like, say, for example, Fox may get bought out. So maybe if there's a price named, it's going to just sit at 44 forever. So maybe I don't want to do that. I'll just click on the garbage can. Very quick to go through these. We don't prompt you if you want to delete them. So if you delete these guys, you want to be sure you want them to go. So you can very quickly go through and slim down your what you want. So here, hey, maybe last night we had a nice big pop up during the day, but we ended up sort of a hanging man. We're still sort of popped back down into this trading range. So maybe that's not what I want to see. So this is a way to very quickly go through and take your scan results and hone them down into something that's a little bit more useful. I usually try to get a scan results of maybe 15 or 20 and then hone it down to maybe 5 or so. So one of the items, I'm just going to pick one at random, is AMD, where obviously that's a big tech place now. So I'll just click on AMD and I'll get a chart. I think parabolic is not even the right word for that. That's like a rocket. That's going straight up. So there's a lot of people who are, from a momentum standpoint, are going to love that. I imagine there's a lot of people who are, like me, a little bit wary of that move. One of the tricks I'll use is to use a chart style here, and I'll use Gaddis Roses. Gaddis taught a class here in Seattle area, and I helped out for a long time with him doing what I'm doing now, lots of tips and tricks. And we came up with this as a way to look at how an item is performing relative to the market, how the sector is performing relative to the market, how the industry is performing relative to the sector, and how the item is performing relative to the industry. So what you'd like to see is that your item is outperforming everything. So your sector is outperforming the market, your industry is outperforming the sector, and your stock is outperforming its industry. And AMD is doing a pretty good job here. I mean, look at AMD against the market, 175%. AMD against the semiconductors, 100% outperformance. So this is a view that will give you a good look into the sector and industry sort of idea of finding outperformers in all areas. And I'll scroll down, and oftentimes here, Gaddis also likes to look at the money flow. I know Aaron talked about that, and on-balance volume. Again, that's an interesting view to look at. I will go down and take a quick look at seasonality. It's usually not a single thing that I'll make the call, but look at this, June. AMD up 100% of the time, average 10% over the last 5 years. I mean, that's a pretty significant seasonality there. So if I have narrowed this down to 2 or 3 items, and one of them gives me a signal like that, and I know it's not a small cap, but it's in technology and semiconductors, and it's got that sort of seasonality, that just might be enough to give it a nod. I'll also look at the point and figure. I want to try and find something that doesn't have a lot of overhead. I mean, my scan's looking for a 52-week high, but if it may be a 52-week high after a pretty significant downfall over the last couple of years, and there may be a lot of overhead supply there that I'm going to have to get through. So maybe I want to take a quick look at the point and figure and just make sure I'm not have a lot of overhead supply where there's a lot of other sellers out there that as soon as the price starts going up, they're going to want to get out and run away. So this is another good one. It's looking like a very long consolidation and a breakout. So this could be another good sign.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
If you're looking at this stock, I mean, you just pointed out how it's, almost, well, it really is like parabolic move to the upside here, but it is breaking out through some consolidation. It looks good on the point and figure. It looks good, on some of those relative charts that you're using. When you find a stock like this, do you set an alert at that point, a price alert, so that if it pulls back to something that you'll buy, or do you just go?
Exactly. So yes, exactly. So I'll keep moving on here, and we'll just kind of use AMD. So okay, I'm going to go back to AMD, and I'm kind of look at this, and the very first thing I do, if say that I'm at the point now where I'm really interested in AMD, I'm thinking, okay, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to be able to pay my house off by December on this thing. I know it. I want to start thinking about where I'm going to put stops and where I'm going to get into this thing. And I use a pyramiding technique. So I don't put everything, an entire position in at once, because I'm pretty much a walking Murphy's Law. If I put everything in at once, the SEC will investigate it tomorrow, or a downgrade will happen. So I'll put in 50%, and then I'll wait maybe and let it go up a couple percent. And then I'll put in maybe 30%, and then I'll let it go up a little bit more and put in the final 20. Sometimes I'll vary that percentage ratio, but I'll sort of let the stock prove that it's continuing to have momentum and to go up. And at the same time, I'll sort of pick out a natural place where I would put a stop. So and this can be done a number of ways. IBD will tell you maybe 6 to 8%. You can look at support if there's a gap. There isn't really a gap on this one, but I know, Tom, you like to sort of get down to gap support. So maybe I would say, well, if it breaks gap support and continues to close, maybe that's where I want to put a stop. There's the various moving averages. So I look at it first, and I try and find where I might want to put a stop. And then exactly like you said, the first thing I do is I go to alerts. So assuming I'll put this into my, I'll do a save as, and I'll put this into my stuff I own. Might already be there. So now I've got it in my watch list, or my the stuff I own. It'll show up on the workbench. I'm going to go back to my members dashboard. I'm going to go down to my alerts. I'm going to create a new alert. This will be a price alert, which is very simple to do. I just pop in AMD. It'll give me the current price. Like I said, I pyramid in every couple of percent. And well, since I designed this, handily enough, there's a calculator there that tells me exactly where that's at. So I can say there's a 2%. I save the alert. So now I've got an alert. So when that goes off, I've already put my 50% in. So my next alert is going to tell me to put in my 30%. I'm going to create a new alert. I'm going to also do AMD again. And I'm going to put a 5% down. So this is not necessarily, switch that to below, not necessarily that I'm going to sell there, but it's going to put it on radar. So what it's going to do, it's going to alert me to say, okay, I need to take you out of my stuff I own that could be pages long and put it in my watch list, because maybe I'm starting to get close to that sell point. When that happens, I need to really reconfirm where I want my stops, what I'm going to do. I need to get my plan together. It's an early warning system. So now I've boxed this guy in. I've got something on the upside and something on the downside. I can kind of give it a little room to run. I don't have to be looking at this daily, because like I say, I'm in for trying to put this for weeks, maybe months. So, but I've got my alert set up such that if anything goes in a certain direction, it'll trigger me to take the next step in my plan. Sometimes I will go ahead, and I talked about, I have 2 entry points for my second. I would be up 2%, and then I would be another 2%. There's a 5% here. So maybe I take this down a little bit from the 5%. Maybe I take it down 1%, maybe 16 cents. So I maybe put in 40. That'd be about a 4%. Save that. I'll go back to my dashboard. Now I go down to my alerts, and I've got my alerts. So if this is my 30% buy point, this is my 20% buy point, and this is my watch point for, so if something starts to go wrong, I'm going to have to take a close look at it and see what's going on. So that's a very handy thing for me, and I use that all the time. Then what I'll do is I've got a little sample here for how I use annotations. And this is just, this is actually an optimal scenario where a trade actually works. It's not my usual. I'll use callouts to sort of put on the chart where I've bought pieces, what price. And if I get all the way up to my full buying, I'll maybe put something in that's the average cost. So I'll have something in my head that says, okay, I own McDonald's at about 141. I can put other items in here, like when I'm up certain levels. Some people will say, if you get up 20%, that's where you really want to make sure you don't give your profit up, and you really want to pull your stops in. So we can go down to the annotate tool here, and there's multiple ways of doing this. You can do a call out like I've done. You can take a horizontal line, maybe use red for your stop. You can use another one up here. This is if that's your target. Maybe you can use green. There's all sorts of ways to do things with this. Another thing people will use for stops, because those horizontal lines do make a little bit of a noise across the whole chart. You can just put it in a little spot where you've initially set your stops. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating history. So maybe I got up to here and it got up to this, and I'm constantly moving my stops up, right? As a trade works, I'm maybe moving up my stops every time it goes a little bit further. I'm latching on to where I want to put my stops. And as I move my stops up, I change my alerts. So originally I had a couple of alerts as I moved in. As I've hit these alerts, I'm also moving my stop up, and I create my new alert. It was 5% down, but as it goes up, I'll keep dragging it up with me so that I get to a point. I don't want to do is be up 20%, kind of lose attention, get busy, find out it pulls an oracle, and it goes all the way back down to where I bought it, and I get out with like $24. I've spent all that time and effort, and I've gotten 2 lattes and a pizza. It's just not worth the effort. So I really want to keep track of it. So I use the alerts. I move these up as I go, and I annotate it so that I can keep a history. I'll just save that. I'll go back out here. Now, at the end of the trade, I typically move out faster than I move in. Stocks go down much faster than they go out, so I'm a little bit more aggressive when things start to go wrong. So I'll probably sell about 50%. And if I go down another, I'll just sell and be done. A lot of times, maybe I'll sell half, and if it recovers, it goes back up. I'll start to, if it breaks past this high, I'll start to maybe move back in. At the very end of the trade, what I'll do is I'll sort of create a little summary, like almost a scorecard. I'll put in my date range. I'll put in these average costs. I should note that I guessed on the average cost. I didn't actually do the math. I'll put in my gain and my profit, and then sometimes I can do things like I compare myself to the S&P or the TSX or whatever industry or index you want to sort of, how did I do? Did I do just average, or did I outperform? And I can actually give myself a grade. I can say, if I made money and I beat the S&P, great, just keep doing it. I could then take that grade. If I really want to get analytical about these, I can come up with a consistent set of rules and how I grade myself. I put it in a spreadsheet, and I can average my trades. I can get a GPA on my trades. Then I can look at my trades, and if they're not going right, I can say, okay, something's going wrong. Either I'm not following my rules, which you should have written down. You should have checklists and follow your rules. Maybe my rules need updating. I can go back through my trades where I've annotated, and I've maybe made notes about why I've done something slightly different than my plan, or some event that happened, like the Oracle downgrade or an SEC investigation or whatever. I track that. And sometimes it's just a case that things are going sideways, and it just means that the market isn't the type of market I trade in. So things that go up and down very quickly, when we get into really choppy markets, I don't have the time to spend paying attention to 1 and 2 day moves. So I know that if I get in and my grades start going down, it's telling me that maybe this isn't time that I'm supposed to be trading. So you can use that grading system for that as well. Then the final thing I do with the chart at the end is I come down and I set the date range to a start end, so the date range covers the action dates that I was in the trade. If I don't do this over time, obviously we'll be putting more bars on the right side, and all this annotations will slowly move off the screen to the left. By setting the date range and saving it, I've sort of locked this view. So I can come back to this chart in this view and basically get a summary of everything I did. And the final thing I do with this is I'll move it into a chart list called 2018 closed trades. And I'll have one for every year, and every quarter or 6 months, I can go back and look through my trades and just see how I did. And I can revise my rules based on what I say. Well, I consistently get to the point where I'm up 20%, and then, man, it drops 10 or 15%, and I don't get out. And I need to set better alerts, whatever I can take away from that. And that's sort of my workflow from beginning to end.
Well, I have to say, first of all, that I was pretty amused. I always like your sense of humor, but I have the same feeling you do sometimes, Murphy's Law. And I'm sure just about everybody who watched this presentation knows that feeling, when you just go through, especially everybody goes through a slump where just nothing works. And, I'm kind of getting this picture now that you're a walking accounting irregularity or something.
Yes, what was this, the Peanuts character who had the rain cloud constantly over him?
Yeah, exactly.
Pigpen or one of the somebody, yeah, something.
Yeah, anyway, that was a great presentation. We've had a lot of guests on here, and Aaron and I have done the anatomy of a trade, and we've had guests who come on and talk about their style and all. But this was really probably the most detailed analysis that we've had, where you've combined not just the your trading style and how you go about your routines and everything, but also using a lot of the StockCharts tools to keep you informed and to keep you up to date and to warn you of certain things, many of the alerts that you set up and so forth. So I think it was a great demonstration, really, of how somebody can use their own trading system and then combine it with some of those tools that you talked about to better manage their trading and their trading results.
Yeah, it is really interesting to talk to a lot of different people and see how many different ways you can use the same tool. And that's one of the things I was hoping that folks will get out of this, is maybe that there's some way that you've used the tool before, but you hadn't thought of it a certain way, or maybe there's a different spin on it. There's a lot of different ways to use these tools.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I've got a few questions, room, real quick. Of course, everybody has. When do you sell? Do you use moving average crossovers as your stop to sell?
I can. I use a number of different things. Certainly, that's one of them. If I start to see volume picking up, I'll start looking at 1 minute bars. I'm starting to see like maybe institutions are getting out of things, or I'm starting to see volume starting to increase. I'm always a little paranoid around earnings, of course. A lot of people will say they don't hold across earnings. Sometimes if I'm really paranoid, I'll go out and buy puts or something as insurance. So there's a lot of different things I'll use. Moving averages is certainly one. Sometimes if I see it break support on strong volume, sometimes you'll see a stock sort of tear down. I know Gaddis talks about 3 lower highs and you're out. That's a very simple rule, but it's often quite effective. I'll also, and this is another thing that Gaddis and I it's something that he and Grayson used forever. We talked about in the class we taught here, was to look at not only yours as an individual, but to look at the sector and the industry as well as some of its competitors, because you'll start to sometimes see the industry or the sector roll over first. So that may be an early warning sign that the sector is starting to come out of favor. Retail looks great, but you're starting to see, Macy's or whatever it's doing great or whatever, but you're seeing XRT starting to roll over. So it's like, maybe that's the canary in the coal mine. So I need to kind of pay attention to the aggregate and just not be focused on my one piece.
Well, that was fabulous. That's pretty much what we had in the chat room for you.
Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier, Bill, that we were running that poll. So I think maybe this would be a good time maybe to take a look at, some of the different tools that you can use to kind of manage, what you do or what everyone does when they're trading, when they're tracking their trades. So which of those would you have checked off? What are the biggest ones for you? I could probably guess, but
mine was a toss up between alerts and the chart list panels, just because the alerts allow me to not pay attention, but be notified. So that's pretty critical to me. And then the chart list panels, again, it's just a quick way for me to not have to go very far to see what's going on. I think all of those, actually, I created the list of those. So I think they're all valuable. But those two, I think, are especially valuable for me because I don't have a lot of time to watch the market. So alerts, I think, is probably my top one, and it keeps me on the straight and narrow, keeps me paying attention to what's going on. And with the new price, so we put this price alert feature in, I think in last October, it's just so very easy now to create price alerts very quickly. And we doubled the number of alerts that people have. So there's no excuse not to just, back up the truck and just pay attention to those things.
Yeah, I could check off all 5 of them, but I haven't really gotten into using the alerts as much because I do follow the market very closely throughout the day, but I still will go back and find stocks. It's like, oh, I meant to look at that when it hit the 20-day and then I didn't I didn't act because I didn't see it at that moment when it did it. And so I do think if you like a stock, I think the alerts, for me, that would be the one that I should use a lot more than I do. But I use the chart list. I would definitely say the chart list for me is number one as well. So I'm agreeing with the majority there.
Well, that's the thing, to challenge people to say, okay, well, maybe I'll try using this a little bit more and see how it works for me. It's a lot of, we can get sort of in routines. I mean, it's good to be in a routine to a certain extent, but it's always nice to sort of say, what else is out there? Am I missing something that could improve and this is if you go back and you look at your trades and you think, wow, I've got this sort of blind spot where this sort of thing keeps happening to me over and over. Well, what can I use to kind of make that better? Do I change my scan to weed out certain things that I kind of constantly get into? Do I, use alerts? What can I do to make that better? And that's always a process, a learning process that we all keep going through.
Yep. Well, it was a great presentation. Awesome having you on here. I know in the past we've only had you for about 10 or 15 minutes, so it's good to get you in here for 30 minutes, go through your whole routine. I think everybody enjoyed that.
Yep. Thanks for having me.